Hey everyone, it's Grady at SUBOVERLAND, and in today's video I'll be going over which Overland vehicle to buy, a new one or a used one. Let's get right into it. And for any of you guys that don't know who I am, my name's Grady. I'm the owner at SUBOVERLAND, and we make used Suburbans into Overland rigs. So we do Overland builds on Suburbans, and we incorporate a lot of different things. But this video is specifically on when you're choosing your base vehicle. You know, there's pretty much two options you got. You can buy a new one or you can buy a used one. And I'm going to go over the pros and cons of each. And I have some numbers, and it should be a good video, hopefully. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It would be awesome to have you along. I will preface this video with saying that I'm not a financial coach, and there's a lot of ways to do things in life. And how to purchase vehicles is one of them. And so I'm not by any means, calling out someone's way of doing something. That's not the purpose of this video at all. The purpose is just, to put out the numbers and the options, and then, let you guys decide what you want. And so I'm just really... there's information, and I'm not bashing on one or the other. I think either could be an option for someone depending on what they're doing with the vehicle and their circumstance, and the list goes on. But for today's, I am going to be using an example of a new vehicle, which I chose to be a 2022 Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro. The reason I chose that is in the overlanding world, Toyota dominates. They do an awesome job with their rigs, besides, all of, the four-wheel drive vehicles. Their cars are great. They're just, it's a good company and good quality vehicles. I've had a bunch of Toyotas. I own a Lexus, which is a Toyota, and I've enjoyed all of my Toyotas throughout the years. And so I just wanted to pick a common overlanding vehicle that I see out there. Tacoma and 4Runner, you'll see them all over the place. Very common build. And then for the used base vehicle, I just chose our vehicle. So our base SUBOVERLAND. It's a model that we offer. It's a Suburban with a stock interior that we have done all the mechanical to. And so the base SUBOVERLAND has 33-inch BFG 10-ply tires, the KO2s, Bilstein 5100 shocks, new suspension, the fluids are changed, tune-up, interior has been freshened up with new seats if it needs it, and it's detailed, washed. So it's by no means is it a new car. It is a used car that we have freshened up and replaced anything that needed done. And so for today's video, I'll be using an example of a 2000 base SUBOVERLAND with about 185K. So just keep that in mind. And then also, I will be using a lot of numbers here. I got these numbers online. The depreciation numbers was from a reputable site that was pretty cool. and there was just average depreciation. And then maintenance stuff, I went off of, I'll explain that later. And then some other numbers to keep in mind. All of these numbers that I'm going to be giving out are based on a 10-year of ownership of the vehicle at 12,000 miles a year. So this is about 120,000 miles worth of driving for this experiment that we're doing here. So, sorry, that was a lot of explaining. But so first off, the 2022 4Runner TRD Pro is $68,000 new. And I got that number. I have a relative that just down the street from SUBOVERLAND, there's a Toyota dealership. So went over to the dealership and asked him. And so I know right now I'm taking this video, inflation's crazy, you know, all these things are going on in the world, and it is affecting price. And so that's the price that you can expect from a dealership, at least around Idaho. Might be more in your area or less, but I think that's a pretty good basis. So $68K for this TRD Pro. And for the base SUBOVERLAND, we price this 2000 with around 185K will be around 12 grand with that base package, and then you can add on from that. And so that's our starting point, 68 and 12. And then my next criteria here was if you're going to get a loan on the car. Most of our clients don't get loans on the SUBOVERLAND. I'm not saying all of them don't, but I would say the majority come with cash. And because of that, there's no interest rate. There's no loan. And I would say the opposite with, like, if you're buying a 2022 vehicle, more than likely you're going to have a car loan. So for this particular instance, I calculated this out. That person had 12 grand down. So they put 12 grand down for the $68,000 4Runner, and the rest was a loan at 4%. That's pretty average market rate right now. And so over the course of the 10 years, you're going to be, so you'll have the car paid off in 10 years, and you'll pay $12,000 of interest for that 4Runner. While with the SUBOVERLAND, you'll be paying zero if you didn't have a loan. And the next criteria I have here is depreciation. So depreciation, I mean, things depreciate. It just happens. And cars are one of the biggest, I guess, depreciators, I guess you could say. For example, I think it's when you buy a new car and you drive it off the lot, I think it's average, the 1 year depreciation, I think, is like 15%. And so that's quite a bit for that first year. But so I just did the average depreciation that I found on the site, and in 10 years, the $68,000 4Runner will depreciate $41,766. And then the base SUBOVERLAND, I put it as depreciating at $8,000. So it'll depreciate $8,000. So in 10 years, the 4Runner will have 120K, and it will have one owner. It will be a clean 4Runner, and you'll be able to sell that for around $26,000 is what this site explains. So 2022 4Runner and 2032 will sell for $26K, which I think is pretty on point. Toyotas are really great for keeping their value versus a lot of other cars, which is a really cool thing. Especially, I would say 4Runner, Tacoma, Land Cruiser, Tundra, those do better than others. And so it's, as far as buying a new car, it's a good option for less depreciation than other companies, I would say. And for a the base Suboverland, in 10 years, it'll have over 300K, and you know, it's not going to be worth a ton of money. So I just put it at around $4,000 for the resale value, because you have a couple factors. It'll be more of a classic then, and so that may play in. So you could actually, there's potential for getting more money, but I didn't calculate that in at all. I didn't want to mess with that. But so $4,000 resale in 10 years. The next thing that I calculated out was maintenance cost. And this is a really tricky one, because you'll like Google and like average maintenance cost for a 2022 4Runner and yada, yada, all this stuff. And that's kind of tricky. So I put it, I kind of in my head calculated my own number in 10 years. How much major repairs are you going to have on the 4Runner? So I'm not really including oil changes and little stuff like that. And it will be under warranty for a lot of those years. And so I put it at $2,000. And this number I think is extremely fair, because Toyotas are a very reliable rig up until 120K, or even, you know, of course, way more than that. You hear all the stories of minimal, you know, maintenance. And I'm a believer of that too. I'm not trying to dog that at all. One thing I will say about this number is it can get very high in a hurry with a Toyota, as far as parts and sourcing the parts and then fixing the vehicle. So this $2,000, if you have any major mechanical issue, you're looking at like at least $5,000. You know, $5,000 for a tranny, $8,000. You know, $5,000 to $10,000. Engine, tranny, differentials, transfer case, stuff like that. So they there's a funny saying about Toyota and a lot of cars in general, but you know, no one really knows the repair costs of a Toyota because they don't break, right? But if they do, it can be pretty brutal. I've had a Sequoia in the past, and it blew a transmission. There was only one rebuilt transmission in all of America, which was super odd, and anyway, it was just a mess. You know, sourcing the transmission, I paid about 2 or 3 times as much as a GM transmission. So anyway, that's something to take into consideration too when you're buying the vehicle. But that'll be for another video. So as far as maintenance cost for the Suboverland, I shot pretty high, I thought, and I put it at $8,000 for those 10 years. And the reason I did that is because whenever I'm buying a vehicle, especially a used vehicle, I like to calculate worst case scenario. And so worst case scenario things are engines, transmissions, differentials, transfer cases, those bigger drivetrain type issues. And so, you know, you can do a transmission in these things for around $2,000, an engine for around $3,000 to $4,000. You can rebuild the diff for around $800. And so anyway, I kind of calculated some of these major things because it's going to have over 300K at the end of its life here. And during that 100,000 miles, you could probably have done, you know, 1 or 2 of these drivetrain issues. So that's where I came up with that $8,000 of maintenance cost. We never expect our clients to pay that during those times. You know, we hope that they don't, but stuff happens, and I like to err on the side of, you know, planning for those type of issues. My personal Suburban, it's got 299, 700. I've almost hit 300K on the thing, and it's had the transmission and transfer case done. And so, you know, engine's still original and running great. I think it'll go for a long, long time, but you just never know. So after having said all of this with all these numbers, I came up with a calculation of it. So you took the purchase price of the vehicle, obviously, and then you added on the loan interest total. So in the 4Runner's case, that was $12,000. And then the you took into consideration the maintenance costs, which was $2,000, and then on top of that you added the depreciation, so that was $41,766. So if you add all of those up, so the 41, 12, and 2, you come up with a $55,802. So I just am calling that total cost, and that's taking into consideration that after the 10 years you sold the vehicle, it's gone, and you sold it for $26,000, around $26,000. And so it's not yours anymore. So you've spent $55,800 during those 10 years to have, a new vehicle. For the base sub-overland, and this is just the same type of calculation. So you bought it for 12 grand, and then after that it depreciated 8, and then you put some maintenance cost in there of 8. So and no loan. So you just bought it with cash. So you're in the 8 grand because you depreciated. It depreciated that much. And then the maintenance cost was at $8,000. And so, and then you sold the vehicle for $4,000 at the end of all this. So that came to $16,000. So the 8 plus 8 is $16,000. So that was total cost of ownership for the Suburban. So you have $16,000 for the used, 22-year-old vehicle at the time of purchase, if it's in 2022, or a brand new 4Runner. Both, the TRD Pro is set up for off-roading, more capable than the Suburban, blockers, and anyway, I'm not going to get into that, but awesome rig, obviously. It's 22 years newer, so it has a lot of different tech. So there's a lot of advantages, obviously, to this, the newer rig. Creature comforts, it's hard to compare in a vehicle, of that age difference if you're going to go like that. And then the Sub-Overland, one thing as I was thinking as I was calculating this all out, if you came into it and just bought it, and then in 10 years you're like, I'm going to just give it away. I'm going to give it to my kid. I'm going to give it away to charity, whatever. So that you would have zero resale at that point. I don't think that's the case. You could always sell the car for something, but so total cost would be 20 grand, let's say. So you're still almost 3 times as less as buying a new vehicle. So this is just price, right? This is the cost of ownership, how much it depreciates, just straight up numbers. This doesn't take into consideration the fact that a new vehicle, this 4Runner, in those 10 years probably should be more reliable than the 22-year-old Suburban. It's just, that would be hard to debate. And I'm not going to, because that would be silly. But there are, new cars have problems and they can be expensive to fix. And so the advantages to the Sub-Overland, in my mind, you have the low cost of, upfront cost. You more than likely don't have to have a loan on it. And maintenance, as far as like major repairs, that $8,000 will go a lot further than $8,000 on a 4Runner. $8,000 on a 4Runner is going to get you like an engine. $8,000 on a Suburban, where you can rebuild the whole vehicle. And so, and the parts are always available, and so it has that advantage in my mind. But as far as straight up reliability, and I'd also be lying, like if you're traveling from New York to the West Coast, and would you rather take a 2000 Suburban with 300,000 miles or a 2022 4Runner with 120,000 miles. So I think all of us would probably choose, the 4Runner. I may or may not, but I know these Suburbans really well, and I trust them with any mileage. So, but that's just me. So I can kind of see that as different, advantages, disadvantages for these particular, vehicles used versus new. One thing that we haven't really touched on is when you're overlanding or just using your car, you're using it for a lot of different, things. And so a new car, you don't want to get scratched per se. Some people do, whatever, but a lot of people don't. And so if you're afraid of getting it scratched and all of this, you're like less likely to use it in those like rough situations. As far as a used car, it's already depreciated and it's down, so you're not gonna lose a ton of depreciation versus a new car. And you can go beat the car up, and if someone hits your car, or your kid gets in a fender bender, or whatever, big scratch, or you mess it up, you're less likely to be upset about that certain thing versus a 22-year-old car. And so those are kind of the things that I was thinking about, other than just straight up cost. The luxury to having an older car is nice in some circumstances, and the new one is better in others. And so hopefully you liked this video and I explained well enough. And if I missed anything, that you had some points that you wanted to bring up versus new versus used, let me know. But to each their own, and the main goal of all of this is to get out there and have fun and enjoy Mother Nature. So hopefully we all can do that as much as possible. But thanks for watching, and if you haven't subscribed, please do. It would be awesome to have you along for the ride. Until next time.